Great. Thanks everybody for joining me. And like I said, we'll get started in just one more minute and then we'll kick things off. I do appreciate you for joining me and um, it's great to have you all here. All right, Calgary, Germany, 60 degrees in Colorado. We've got Italy. This is great. So, all right. I don't want to take up any more time than I need to. It's right 2 o'clock Eastern time for me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is Revit Automation Made Easy. And today we're going to talk about how to leverage AI to create custom tools without the learning curve, or at least with a lower learning curve than you might be used to when it comes to programming. So once again, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate everyone being here and taking the time. So it's great to have a good cast of people and from all over the world, which I also really appreciate. So a couple things as we get started here. I just want to give you a quick overview of what you're going to learn, what we're going to cover today. So we're going to look at the building blocks of Revit add-in development, and we're going to be looking at the skills that you need in order to be successful developing add-ins with Revit API and C#, because things have changed I'd say even in the past year and a half to a year. Things have changed. I know in my own practice of building custom tools, it has changed. And that's specifically because of AI. And we're going to talk about how AI can help bridge that programming knowledge gap. There is a lot of knowledge needed to be able to program, and AI, particularly the tools that are coming out, which seems like every week there's new tools, can really help us manage that better. And I'm going to show you some examples of automations that can save hours weekly. So that's the quick overview of what we're going to look at. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to share with you details about my Revit Add-in Bootcamp program. We're going to be starting it's going to be the 9th cohort, and that's going to start on March 31st. So I'm going to share you some details about that. Now, also, before we get to that, a few housekeeping things. If you do have questions, again, you can just go ahead and put them in the chat, or actually put them in the question and answer panel. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So if you want to share comments or thoughts periodically, I'm going to be going through them and just seeing what you're all saying. And then this session is being recorded. I know there was a question in the chat from William about that. And I'm going to send out a link to the recording soon after we wrap up. So keep an eye out for that as well. But it is being recorded. In fact, let me just double check. I know I heard it go on, and I'm just going to verify. So yeah, we are all set here, and I'll send that link out once we finish. All right. Now, before we get into it, what we're also going to look at today is Launchpad, which is a new app. It's a new Revit add-in that I developed, and I'm going to show you some examples of Launchpad throughout the presentation. And essentially, it's a Revit add-in that allows you to write C# code inside of Revit. So we'll talk about that and how that fits into kind of the sort of developer framework. All right, let's go. Okay, so that's our welcome. Just a quick check-in here, and just want to give you some kind of framework for who this presentation is for. And this presentation is for you if you're an AEC professional, so you're an architect, engineer, maybe you're a modeler, someone in the AEC industry, and you're using Revit regularly. You're probably already skilled at creating models and documentation. And you're also the kind of person who wants to do things smart. So you're looking for ways to improve your efficiency. You don't like doing things that are really tedious. And maybe you've done some of these things in the past. This one I know, let me go back for a second. I'm sure all of us have experienced that pain inside of Revit when tasks take way too long and are way too boring, and you think there's got to be a better way. Now, maybe you've looked at the Revit API documentation and you've felt overwhelmed, and I think that would be a natural response to that. And maybe you've seen colleagues either in your office or online who already know programming and you've seen them do some pretty amazing things, and you wish that you could actually do the same. So that may be you. Maybe you've experienced some of those. And I just want to let you know, like, I get it. I get all of those things. I've been a Revit user for a long time. And it's difficult because when you have project deadlines and you're working on projects, learning new skills is a challenge because there's just only so many hours in the day. And that's just a reality. And when you think about the technical skills that you need to be able to create Revit add-ins, that can seem really daunting. And in particular, if you know there's a better way to do things, but maybe you don't have the skills or the tools to implement it. So that can be really frustrating. And again, I've been there before, so I know those pains all too well. So let's talk quickly about what I call the automation problem. And the automation problem is, what you think it is, and then there's really what the problem is. So you might think that the problem is, you don't have a computer science degree. You're not able to program because you don't have that background, or that the Revit API is too complex and, it's just not something that you can actually be able to comprehend, or that you already need to know how to program before you can get into the Revit API, that you need to already know C# really well before you can even tackle the API. So maybe you think that's kind of what the problem, or that's what's holding you back. And maybe you've tried some of these solutions. Maybe you've looked up random YouTube tutorials. You may have even gone to ChatGPT or Claude or another LLM and asked it to generate some code. And maybe you already look at Dynamo or PyRevit as an alternative. And to be honest, those are great alternatives. So maybe you've tried some of these things. And there's a reason why that's not working. That's not always helping you get over that learning curve. And that's because tutorials without structure don't always give you that next step. They're not always part of a continuous progression of learning. And getting code from ChatGPT without knowledge on how to implement that code is useless. And we'll talk about this quite a bit. Like LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude are great at generating a ton of code. Like they are really, really good at that. But you need to know how to implement it to actually make it useful and put it into practice. Now, also Dynamo and PyRevit are great, but they are limited compared to C#. In fact, both Dynamo and PyRevit at their core are written using C#. They are Revit add-ins. And so Revit uses C# as its kind of base language to build on top of the API. So, they can take you, Dynamo and PyRevit can take you pretty far, but there is a point where you need either greater efficiency or you need some additional capabilities that are not available. And if you go looking at the Revit API documentation for an answer, you're going to be frustrated and disappointed because it's going to assume that you have some programming knowledge. So I like to say this, and I'll say it again when we get a little bit further on, but the API documentation is a roadmap, but it's not going to teach you how to drive. So it's useful once you know how to drive, but getting there takes some other paths. Okay, but really the real problem is if you want to learn how to create Revit add-ins, you want to create automations using C#, you do need a structured path that's going to bridge your actual Revit knowledge, which you've spent a lot of time gaining with programming skills. And if you can combine those two together, you can do some pretty amazing things. And so part of that too is not about learning everything at once. It's not drinking from the fire hose. It's working kind of in a more progressive start and building that foundation and then adding on to it systematically. So that's how we effectively learn. And this will allow you, and going on this approach will help break down that learning curve into manageable steps. So again, that learning curve with C# compared to other things like Dynamo and like PyRevit is a lot steeper. But if we are able to do this systematically and approach it, thoughtfully, we can break that curve into a series of steps that we can actually progress and make progress with it. And this is kind of my big point today with AI tools. That barrier can be a lot lower than it's been. And we can leverage AI if we do it in the right way. It can really help us make a lot of progress very quickly. So there was a question before we get further. Let me just click that button. Rick was asking, are these same methods and tools, can they be used to create tools for the ACC environment? And they can. Now, we're going to be talking specifically about the Revit API. The ACC environment, if you're going to, or if you want to build on top of that, that is done using a different API, which is part of the Autodesk platform services. And it's different in the sense that that's more of a web API. So we're going to be talking about specifically C# and the Revit API. There are some similarities and there are a whole bunch of differences between the two. So I think I'll leave it at that. I could do a whole, and I have done whole sessions specifically about working with Autodesk platform services. So I can't get into it too much, and other than to say yes and no, Rick. Some of the skills can be used. Some of them are not, because again, they're separate. They're different APIs. I would be interested, though, to hear more from you about what specifically you're looking to do in ACC. There's another question Rick posted in the chat. I thought PyRevit was written in Python, thus the Py. And so that is true. What PyRevit is it is a Python interpreter that its core, at its core, it's written in C#. So the Python interpreter is written in C#, but it allows you to write Python scripts that then actually run on top of that interpreter. But the underlying code for PyRevit is C#. So it's kind of tucked in there. There's a lot of bits and pieces to PyRevit. It's a very complicated add-in. So there's layers to it. But ultimately, the piece that interacts with Revit is C#. The part where the tools are written and that allows you to actually write your own tools, that's all done through Python. So Python gets read, gets converted into C#, and then it runs in Revit through C#. So a little bit convoluted, but it works. Okay, so we're getting in there. I want you to, though, imagine, if you will, what a potential future you could look like. So let's say, down the road, 6 months, a year, and you've gone on this journey, you've actually learned how to program, and you're creating your own tools. So let's just talk for a second here about what's going to change. So first of all, your thinking is going to change. So you'll go from I can't code to I can build tools that are going to solve problems. And you go from thinking the API is overwhelming, and I remember this vividly when I started learning, to knowing exactly where to look. And that's a transition that I, again, remember going through when I first would look at the API documentation. I'd be like, this is really confusing. And now that's usually the source where I go. Granted, it's taken some time to get there, but it is possible to actually make sense of it. And this is my favorite one here, to go from a standard Revit user into a Revit god who can customize the software however they see fit. So that's something to think about, how your thinking would change. Now, how are your feelings going to change? How are you going to feel? Well, you'll feel probably a lot more confident. And when you have a technical challenge, you'll have skills and be able to do that. You'll be able to feel that satisfaction of creating something that saves people a lot of time. And hopefully they'll tell you, hey, you just saved me, my weekend, because I was able to get this done really fast based on that tool you created. And then you'll also feel excited about possibilities within the software rather than feeling limited by that. And then lastly, let's talk about your actions. So once you know how to program, once you have this skill, how will you act? Well, you will start identifying inefficiencies in your workflow, and they'll really bother you. You'll be like, man, I could just write a tool that would fix this. You'll start to look at challenges with a developer's mindset. And this is really important because you'll start looking for problems to solve, and you'll start to think about how you could solve them just kind of naturally. So it really changes the way you approach things, particularly as a user of software, because now you have this capability to create custom tools and remove inefficiencies. And that leads you to develop a toolkit. So as you're creating tools, and then as new needs arise, you can create new tools on top of that. So that's how your actions can change as a result of it. All right. So that's what the future can look like. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about me and my background. I've alluded to a few things. If you don't know me, I'm Michael Kilkelly. I am the founder of ArcSmarter. I'm a registered architect. I'm not a programmer by trade. I didn't go to, I don't have a computer science degree. I went to architecture school. I didn't go, for any kind of programming or computer engineering. I'm entirely self-taught. I tried to learn programming though a few times. And in grad school, I tried and I literally failed the class and it just didn't work for me. I figured, I was never going to learn to program. I really wanted to learn, but I just struggled so hard in that class. I figured it was not going to happen. And I thought, okay, it's just too hard, point blank, and that my brain didn't work that way. Like, I'm an architect. I'm not a programmer. My brain can't kind of grok how that all works. And it wasn't until later when I actually did learn, and I learned out of necessity. I kind of had to do it. Now, this was when I was working at Gary Partners. And actually, I have a fun picture here. Let me grab this picture of me and Frank. So this was, on the other screen. There we go. So this was me back in my long hair days. This was actually my last day at Gary Partners. So I worked there from 2005 to 2012. And for me, it was a great experience, but it was a lot of work. And so my low point at Gary Partners came when I was working on a particular project, and it was the Brooklyn Arena project. We had a deadline. It was around our 50% DD deadline. In fact, I actually have a project, just to give you some sense of scale. This is actually the model for the project. So there was a basketball arena, there was some mixed use, residential, office, all sorts of stuff all thrown in. So very big, complicated project. So we had our 50% DD deadline coming up, and I had already spent 40 hours at the office, and it was my job on the team to kind of package things up. And I had to, get all of our drawings together, generate all the PDFs, get our models together. And it wasn't particularly hard work, but it took a lot of time. It would take me 8 hours or so after it kind of pencils down to get all of this done. And it wasn't a lot of fun. So for that particular deadline, I got home at 3 a.m. And again, I'd been at work all week. It's Saturday, like I'm completely shot and my head's pounding, my eyes are red. And I realized I had to find a better way. Something needed to change because we were going to have other deadlines coming up. And, I needed to get a handle on this because I didn't want to have to do all of that work. I'd rather be home with my family. I had a young son at that point, and it wasn't like I was getting paid overtime. So I'm just kind of putting this time in, and I wasn't getting anything out of it other than, I got to keep my job. So I wasn't benefiting, it wasn't worth the cost that it took in terms of my personal life. So the next day, weekend ended, I got caught up on my sleep, and I committed to learning how to code. And I decided, on that Monday, I'm going to figure this out. I need to automate this entire process. I need to save time because that was going to improve my quality of life. I didn't want to have to be doing those late hours anymore. So I bought some books. I Googled like crazy, and then I started writing some scripts, and they were ugly. But the important thing is they actually worked. So I was able to progressively, make some tools that I would use for my workflows. And bit by bit, I grew that toolkit. So the high point was at our next deadline. This was prior 75 DD. I had reduced that whole drawing, cleanup, and packaging process from 8 hours down to 1 hour. And there was a whole lot of trial and error. But this was great since I had created these tools, I've externalized that workflow. I could direct other people to run the scripts. So I just managed the process, and then the work got done much faster. And that was again, a turning point, a realization for me. And what I really needed to do in order to get over that learning curve with program was to solve my own problems. And I had to have some skin in the game, and that would help me overcome that learning curve. And that's what it took. Now, from there, as I mentioned, I left Gary Partners, in 2012, I moved back to the East Coast. So I went from LA to the East Coast to Connecticut, where I am now. I founded Arc Smarter. At Arc Smarter, I wrote a whole lot of Revit macros. I got into first VB.net and then C#. I created the SmartPad add-in, and then I started developing custom tools for clients. Now, one of my clients was IMEG, and I actually work full-time as part of the innovation and automation team at IMEG now. And at IMEG, I've developed 40 plus tools, mostly for Revit. And then I've worked on sort of the design end for some web apps as well. And these tools are getting used a ton, more than 10,000 times a month. And we calculate all of our usage so we can get a sense for the ROI, or the return on investment. And we're finding that's providing a huge ROI for the company. So that's my background. And I want to share my knowledge with you today, all the things that I've learned. And still, I remember, back in the day when, as I mentioned, looking at the API documentation and just feeling like I'm never going to figure this out, feeling lost and wasting a lot of time, trying to piece together knowledge from all these different resources. I mentioned I was self-taught, so it was difficult, and there was a lot of banging my head on my desk. And then also all throughout this, questioning whether I had what it takes to learn. So I remember all of that. But over time that changed. And, now I'm able to go back and remember it, but I'm sort of grateful for that journey and that process. Okay, so let's get into it. But first, a question. Mark says, I'm going to answer this. I need to gather room information from numerous links, add them to a single data construct, then process that list at one time. What is the best data construct in C# to do those types of processing? First glance, as you just reading that, Mark, I would say if you created a custom data class, provided that the information was going to be standardized in terms of what room information. So if you need room name, area, some other parameters, as long as that's consistent from, or mostly consistent from link to link, then you can make a single class and then just create instances of that class. And then also, now that you have it sort of together, you can kind of aggregate that and then output it however you want. So that would probably be my approach, would be just create your own custom class that has those properties and parameters. And there's a lot of benefits to doing that as well. So hopefully that points you in the right direction. But yeah, custom classes is the way to go. Okay, so let's just get into this. You might be thinking at this point, just real quick, that you can go ahead and you can learn this all on your own, and you totally can. That's what I did. And it's totally possible. There's a ton of resources. Some of them I've created. The only thing to note is, you're going to have to piece together your own learning path. And that's, there may not be some consistency from resource to resource, and, that it may not have some structure that you need. Now, with AI tools, you can definitely learn you can learn a lot faster than ever before. That's totally true. But you need to know how to use these tools effectively. And we're going to talk about that specifically in a moment now. Now, you may also be thinking that you don't have time for this. I have a job. I don't need to worry about taking on this other skill. And I would say, well, if you're able to build tools that make you work faster, can you really afford to waste time on being inefficient? So there's kind of this trade-off in that learning a new skill is going to make you more efficient. It is going to take some time. But if we look at the return on investment, you may save a lot more time in the end. Plus, it makes you a lot more attractive and valuable employee for a firm. And if you think about spending that 3 to 5 hour investment, that can save you a whole lot of time over your career, and you have that skill set. And maybe you think, okay, I've never coded before. This seems way too advanced. And again, I mentioned that if you start with the fundamentals, you can learn C#, you can learn the Revit API simultaneously as you go through them. You don't need to have that prior programming experience. Also, with AI, that learning curve can be dramatically reduced. And this is important. Like, you understand what needs to be automated. You're the subject matter expert, the domain expert. So you have an intuitive sense of how things should work inside of Revit, and that's extremely valuable. So don't discount that part of it. All right, so let's get into the meat of things, which is what I call the Revit developer success path. And in this path, we're going to be looking at kind of the 4 steps to it. And specifically, I've arranged these in kind of a construction-friendly framework. So step 1, we're going to be looking at the foundation. And this is really where we want to start from. And when it comes to programming, the foundation is having the right tools. So we're going to look at specific tools for creating Revit add-ins. Now, the most fundamental one is going to be Visual Studio Community. And Visual Studio Community, it's a free download. It's free software that's available from Microsoft. Let me just click on that link. And you go to visualstudio.microsoft.com. And from here, and I should say, I'm going to provide you with links to all of these things. So, you can Google up Visual Studio Community, but I'll also give you a link for that. And this, again, it's a free download. It is what's called an IDE, and that's a integrated development environment. So this is where we actually write code. So you can download Visual Studio. I actually have it up right here. And, it's sort of like Revit, except there's a lot of text instead of graphics, but we have our Solution Explorer here on the left side. We're going to do all of our coding right here in the middle. And then there's a properties window on the right, which I have closed. And then also we get our output right down here so we can get some feedback as we're writing code. But this is where we write our C#. This is where we compile the code. It creates a DLL, and then we have ways to connect it into Revit. But this is, for the most part, one of the primary tools that we'll use. And again, it's a free download, which is great, and it makes things a lot easier for us. Okay, so once you have Visual Studio, the next tool are getting some Revit templates that are specific. They're specific for Visual Studio, and they're specific to Revit. And they also serve as a way to connect Visual Studio to Revit. Now, I'm going to give you 2 sources here. One of them is from Jeremy Tamick, who is like the developer sort of evangelist at Autodesk. And he has a series of kind of simple, basic add-in templates. And there's one for each version of Revit. Let me go here. And what they do, again, is it's a file in Visual Studio, and you can create a new project off of it. And what Jeremy's templates do is that they just bring in all the right resources that you need. And he has some automation built into the template as well that will copy your DLL files over to the appropriate Revit folder. So it makes things nice and easy. Now, another good source, these ones are a little bit more advanced, is from Nice 3-Point. And if you go through this link both of these are on GitHub. These are more advanced. They have a lot of different kind of coding features that are built in. Some of these, I haven't used this one, but I think it will allow you to build multiple versions of Revit from one source of code. I have my own templates that I use through the Revit Add-in Academy and the Revit Add-in Bootcamp that do that similarly. So this file here in Visual Studio, this is based off of my template. I can build anywhere from Revit 20 to Revit 2025, and I can do it as a debugger or release. So I can type my code in here, and then I just press the play button, and that's going to launch Revit, and then it's going to load my add-in, and then I can kind of test my code and make sure that everything works out. So it makes the process a lot easier. You can start from a blank file in Visual Studio, and I can load in the appropriate Revit DLLs. And then when I build my code, I'm going to have to copy it over to the right Revit folder. So, you can definitely do that, or you can use a template, and it makes it a lot easier. Now, Dave has a question. It says, speaking of Revit versions, how did the .NET update impact creating add-ins with C#? Yeah, so that was a big deal. So what happened was the earlier versions, so Revit 2024 and earlier, all were built using the .NET framework. The last was .NET Framework 4.8. And in Revit 2025, they changed the API to use .NET 8, which is a much more modern C# framework. And so this has kind of all the stuff that's under the hood. And it did change things quite a bit because again, it's a different framework. What's nice with the .NET 8 is it's just a more there's a lot more features that are available to us in that C# version, so C# 8. So it's nice on the coding end, but it did kind of wreak havoc a bit on add-ins because in particular this my template here, because it supports all of those versions, it switches the framework that you're using. So if I'm in debug Revit 2024, and then I switch to 2025 in the back end, it's actually swapping out and using a different .NET, just a different framework altogether. So if you have templates that are set up to handle that, it was really easy. And I spent a lot of time developing this framework so it could make that transition, and it can include previous versions of Revit and then all of the new versions going forward. But depending on how you structured your add-ins, it could have been just a real pain because you had to kind of mix and match those different underlying architecture to it. So again, I felt like it wasn't too bad because I just created a new template from scratch, and I've been able to use that. I've heard a lot of other people had a lot of pain because of that, and it really depends on how your code was structured. And if you had a lot of legacy code, there's a lot to update for sure. All right, so those are our templates, and those are two of our kind of tools that we want to use. Now, we also want to look at some additional tools that can help us just as we're kind of learning the Revit API. And this is one of my favorite tools. And let me know in the chat if you're using this. It's called Revit Lookup. This is another tool that comes from Jeremy Tamek. It's a free download. And if you go, again, I'll provide you with these links. Yes, some of you are using that, which is great. But what this lets you do is it allows you, let me go back for a second, and I just want to look at the code for this, and we can show you a screenshot here. So it allows you to look at elements in the Revit model through the lens of the Revit API. In fact, actually, I have Revit up, so I'm going to pull it up. And if I go into add-ins, I have Revit Lookup right here. So I'll select this text note, and I'm going to go to add-ins and Revit Lookup, I'm going to snoop selection. So it's going to pop up this data grid. And now I'm looking at that text note not as a graphic thing on the screen, but I'm looking at all of the methods and properties that are available to me for text notes in the Revit API. And you can see there's a lot of data here. There's a lot more data here than there is when I have the properties window open. So if I have the properties window, I grab that text note, I can change the text note type, and then I have some properties as far as graphics go. When I look at it through Revit Lookup, there's a lot more to it. So this is really looking under the hood, and I can look at the individual parameters that are here. Again, some of these are exposed in properties and some of them aren't. So this gives you a really good look at what is really happening, again, under the hood of Revit. And this is an invaluable tool. Even if you're using PyRevit or Dynamo, this can be really useful because it's going to present things in the language of the API. And the language of the API can be different from how we're used to thinking about things inside of Revit. And again, Mark is saying in the chat that you can, it provides a roadmap to drill down to the data you need. So if you're looking for something specific, something that you want to change, you can find exactly what that parameter is called or what method you need to do. So there's a lot here, and it's a super, super useful tool. Again, I'll provide a link to that, and it's a free download, which is great. All right. Now, the other tool that's worth putting in your toolbox, and I put a little asterisk next to this because, again, it's not great when you're starting out, but it does become valuable later on, and that's the Revit API website. I'll show you the website. There's actually multiple websites now. For a long time, there was kind of one source. Well, there was two sources. There was the actual official Autodesk documentation, and then that got put on a website called Revit API Docs. And but there's been some variations of that. But before we talk about that, let's just discuss what's an API. So an API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's essentially a way that software developers can make code accessible from the outside. So the outside developers like us can build on that API to create our own custom tools. And APIs are everywhere now. We have them in Revit, you have them in Word, you have them, in cloud tools like ACC that has the Autodesk Platform Services. Google has all kinds of APIs. The world is lousy with APIs, but essentially it is a way that we can build tools on top of other tools. Now, the Revit API documentation, this is my favorite site right now, Rev API Docs. Let me just go there real quick. There's no ads on it, so it's very kind of clean and stripped down. But I can choose a particular version of Revit. I can go in here, and then on the left-hand side, I'm seeing all of what are called the namespaces. So these are just ways that we organize things, or things are organized inside the API. So I can click on Revit DB namespace, and then I'm going to see all of the base kind of elements and properties inside of Revit. So I can see here is the curve class. Now, if you know Dynamo at all or done any programming inside of Revit, curves are essentially a type of line. That's how the API sees them. So I can look at the members of that class, and the members are organized into methods, which is basically a code that does something, performs an action, and then properties, which are kind of like containers or variables. So the whole API is organized this way, where we have a class, that class has methods, and that class has properties. So when I'm developing my add-ins, I can make reference to, for example, if I want to look up let's see, there we go. I want to look at a wall. So if I want to create a wall, I'm going to use the wall class. And if I go into methods, I can use the wall create method. And you can see there's a bunch of different, I lost it. Here we go. There's a bunch of different methods, wall create methods I can use depending on, do I have a single curve? Do I have a bunch of curves? Do I have my wall type, or so forth? So I have a lot of options that I can use to create a wall, but that's all documented here in the API. You'll see though, sometimes you'll get some code samples, but not always. But it's not, you don't want to read this before bed, right? This is not super easy to understand. Rick's saying that's the part that completely loses me. What's a class? What's a method? So a class is really, that gets into object-oriented programming, but it's essentially a container. It's really a container for methods and properties. But I think of it as, it's a thing, in this case, a wall class describes a wall in the Revit API. A method is an action that I can use to either create, or you can see I have create, flip, get stacked wall member IDs. And then the properties are sort of the variables that determine that wall instance. So when I create a wall, I'm creating an individual instance of that actual wall class. And then these are the properties that instance can have. One of those properties is a wall type. So a wall type is a class, and that wall type has its own methods and properties that describe what you can do with a wall type. And again, it gets a little complicated because you can see there's a whole hierarchy here. So in terms of a wall or a wall type, it starts with an element, which is the base kind of class for things in Revit. Then we have element type. And so it sort of makes its way through this hierarchy. So that's the quick 5-minute discussion of how things get structured. And again, if this looks really confusing, that's normal. This is much more useful down the road. And I show this so you are aware of it. Oftentimes, if you Google something like how to create a wall plus Revit API, you're going to see the Revit API documentation is going to come up first. And again, that's not the most helpful way to start, but you'll often see that. And it took me at least 6 months to a year before I actually felt comfortable looking at this kind of stuff. And now it's switched where if I have to solve a problem, I'm going to look in the API documentation, but I've been doing this for, 10 years or so. So this is not where you want to start, but know that this tool exists, and it will be useful at some point. All right. And as I mentioned earlier, the Revit API, again, it can be daunting, it can be overwhelming, it can be frustrating, but it is really a roadmap. It's not going to teach you how to drive. It's not a narrative. You don't want to read it before bed unless you want to go to sleep. But think of it that way. So, when you're starting out, you need to learn how to drive before you can start opening up that roadmap and figuring out how to get to, California from the East Coast. Okay, now our last tool that I want to show is a new one, and this is a tool that I created called the Revit API Launchpad. And this came out of having taught AEC professionals, architects, engineers, modelers, contractors, how to program. And there is, as we've gone through all of these steps using templates and using Visual Studio, there is a lot of friction to getting started. And what works with Launchpad, and the reason why I created it is it allows you to write C# code directly inside of Revit. So let me switch over. I'm just going to do a quick demo of it. But here, I'm going to open up Launchpad. This is what it is. It's sort of a combination of a slimmed down version of Visual Studio, plus it has lessons here on the left-hand side. So I can go through lessons kind of on my own, self-guided, and then I can actually type code directly here inside of Launchpad. So if I type, I'm going to just do task dialog dot show, and this is essentially going to just create a dialog box inside of Revit. And I'm going to say, hello. Okay, so I type my code. This is in C#, and then I click the run button, and it's going to execute that code much like I would do with an add-in. So I'm writing C# code, but I don't have to do it outside in Visual Studio. One of the frustrations in starting to program is it takes a lot of trial and error and back and forth. When I'm using Visual Studio here, I can do this same thing. I can actually I'll do a demo a little bit later, and I'll show you how we can transfer code. But if I copy this here, I'm going to just copy it to clipboard. I'm going to go to Visual Studio. I'm going to paste it. And now if I want to test it, what I need to do is I need to build my code. This is going to go ahead and create a DLL file. Then it's going to launch Revit. And then, in fact, I'll do that. Let's see, I'll just do it. I have 25 open. I'll do it in Revit 2024. You'll see there's a lot of steps that need to happen. So it's compiling my code. It's actually building it in the background. Now it's going to copy it over to the right Revit folder. Revit is launching in the background, and it just takes time. Now, there are things that you can do inside of Visual Studio that you'll never be able to do inside of Launchpad. But in the space of time, depending on when you're first learning, I'm able to test things maybe like 5, 10, 15 times before Revit even opens from Visual Studio. So Launchpad, again, it's brand new, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. But the whole purpose of it was to make it easier at that early stage when you're working with C# and the Revit API. Yeah, so you can see, okay, Revit 2024 is opening. It can take, depending on how your Revit is set up to 5 minutes or so to open. Okay, so now here's my add-in. I gotta click through this. There we go. Then I'm gonna have to open up a file, and then I can actually run my add-in at that point. And as I said, Launchpad, I could rip through like 5 or 6 different things to test out. Barry has a question that, do you need Visual Studio installed to use Launchpad? No, so it is a Launchpad is an add-in itself. I wrote it using Visual Studio, but you don't need to have Visual Studio installed. So it's kind of a standalone thing. And then Edward can scripting show overlaps of text and dimension? Yes, you can. Let me click the answer question. You can definitely go ahead and do that. we'll have to talk a little bit more about this, Edward. The way you would do it, I think, just off the top of my head, is you would get the bounding boxes of all of the text or the dimensions, and then look to see where, where the overlaps are, where you have, a collision essentially. And so I think there's some ways to do it. There's probably some smarter ways because the way I'm thinking could be computationally expensive just because you have to iterate through all of the potential things. Or you could actually, no, I think you could probably write a filter that would look specifically for collisions between text elements. Yeah, we can talk about that later on down the road. There's an anonymous attendee had a question. How can you transfer a working code in Launchpad into a Revit plugin? I'll show you that. Actually, I'm going to go and do a kind of a simple example in a minute here, and I'll show you how that would work. It's pretty straightforward. So finally, here we are in Revit. If I go ahead and open up, I'm going to just open up my new file. And now I have my add-in, and then I can test that. Finally, I can test that code by just I'm going to go here to add-ins and external tools, Revit Automation Made Easy. I have that in Command 1. And then there's my test dialog. So considerably longer than just going straight through Visual Studio. Now I can go back, just using Launchpad. I'm going to just cancel that. That's going to close that session of Revit. And now I'm back here in Visual Studio. Okay, so those are the tools that you really want to get set up with to make that experience work much better. Now, step 2, so we have our foundation now. Now we want to start building out our framing. Now with framing, what we're talking about here is the right skills. So we want to have the appropriate skills that we need in order to be able to code. We want to build the fundamentals and have a good understanding of both C# and the Revit API. Tim has a question here. Do you recommend reading up on the fundamentals of C#? Typically, like when I'm teaching Revit add-in development, I'm doing it simultaneously. So you're learning C# and you're learning the Revit API because they sort of work together. And for me, and I find with a lot of students in the Revit add-in bootcamp in the academy, that they need that understanding of what they're building. Like you can go and take a C# course, but some of the examples may not apply to you, or they may not be all that appropriate. So I find if you're working in Revit and you're creating tools that you're going to use, that combination of the two is what really helps get over the learning curve. Okay. So let's talk about the right skills, and I'm going to demo this inside of Launchpad. I'm going to show how to get elements in the model. We're going to loop through those elements. We're going to get some parameters and set parameters, and then we're going to alert the user. So this is, from a coding perspective, pretty straightforward, but these are skills that we use all the time when we're building more complicated add-ins. So let me switch here into Visual Studio. I'm sorry, I'm going to switch into Revit, and here I am in Launchpad. I'm going to close down my lessons pane here, and I'm going to just reset. I'm going to do a clear. And I saw there was another in the Q&A, something came up. Mark's asking, what's the major limitations of Launchpad? When do you migrate next steps from early code in Launchpad to Visual Studio? I'm still trying to figure out that breakpoint. I'll show you some features that I've added in Launchpad that allow you to create user interfaces. So it's really when you want to get something that's really custom, or you have a user interface that has a lot of interaction. There are some things I'll show you too with Launchpad Command, which is kind of the more advanced version of Launchpad, that make it a little bit easier to manage your code, especially as you start getting a lot of code. But there is a breakpoint. And so I'm going to show you some tools that I've developed with Launchpad as well that'll kind of give you some sense of the scope. So we'll get to that, Mark. Let's see. Robert is asking, in the future, do you anticipate AI incorporation into your interface? It's tedious to go back and forth between AI and coding interface. Yes. So I'm going to show you, Robert, that's something that I'm working on with the Launchpad command. And it's still early days on that. Command's still in development, but I'll give you a preview of that. Will has a question. Can Launchpad handle event management? Yeah, so that's one limitation. Launchpad it won't handle or be able to read events that are happening inside of Revit. So if you're looking to create an add-in that responds to when a user clicks a certain element, that you're going to need to do as an add-in. So Launchpad wouldn't do that. Also, if you want to be able to interact with the model while you have a dialog box open, that's another thing where Launchpad doesn't do that. So it will do a bunch of things, but there is a line where, okay, if you want that capability or that's essential for your tool, you're going to need to switch into Visual Studio. And Mark asks, dialog windows would need Visual Studio. Not necessarily. I have a new version of Launchpad. That's what I'm running here. If any of you were part of the sort of the early adopters for Launchpad that may look a little bit different, I have this version is going to be coming out this week, and you can actually do user interfaces. So I'm going to show you an example of that in a second or shortly. All right, so we're going to get into some of the fundamentals here for our coding, and I'm going to do just a real simple example of a script here and I'm going to use Launchpad again because it's just a lot faster to get started. And let me just open up. Here we go. Okay. So this script, what it's going to do is it's just going to gather up all of our text notes in the model, and I'm just going to convert them into uppercase. So if you can see here, I have a lot of text notes, but some of them are in uppercase, some of them are in sentence case. It's kind of a hot mess. So let's say I want to standardize and I want everything to be uppercase. So I'm just going to start writing some code. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the text notes in a model. And to do this, I'm going to use what's called a filtered element collector. This is typical C# context syntax. I'm going to declare my variable first. So I am creating what's called a filtered element collector. So that is the type of the thing that I'm creating, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it collector. And I'm going to set it equal to a new filtered element collector. Now I need to tell it, okay, what model do I want to collect from? Collector, there we go. And I'm going to pass in parentheses this doc. This is a document variable, and that represents the current document inside of Revit. So I've created my filtered element collector. Now I'm going to apply the actual filter. So I'm going to say collector dot of class, and the class I'm going to specify is the text note class. So I'm going to type of, and this is going to be a text note. So if you've used Dynamo at all, essentially what I'm doing here in code is the all elements of class node. So I have, or all elements, I'm trying to think that it's changed, the syntax of it, the nodes of it have changed. But essentially I'm using similar to the all elements of category. This is kind of the same thing, and that's what Dynamo is doing in the nodes. I'm specifying the class. I could be specifying the category, but I'm doing the class. And then I'm passing it into my filter right here. So once I've done that, let's see how many of these elements we have. So I'm going to just type console.writeLine, and I'm going to output down here. When I run this, it's going to output the text that I'm going to put here to my output window. So let's say this is a test. So right now we're not going to do any sort of model, live model data. But if I click run, you can see it writes down here in the output, this is the test. So if I wanted to output how many elements I have, I'm going to create what's called a string. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put a dialog. You know what? I'll do it the old way. I'm going to say I found, and I'm going to do plus, then collector.count. This is a variable, so I'm using the collector, and I'm saying, give me the number of elements in the collector. And then I'm going to add it again to the rest of my string. So I found however many text notes in the model. All right, so I'm going to write that line. I found, then we're going to input the variable. This should be a number. And then that's going to output text notes in the model. So if I click run, it says I found 335 text notes in the model. So my collector got 335. So now what I'm going to do Now that I have those elements, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loop through them. So I'm gonna, oops, wrong way. When I type this slash, these forward slashes, that's creating a comment in Visual Studio, in Launchpad. And a comment is code that's human readable, but it's not going to get compiled. So this is really for me. It's not for Launchpad to kind of figure anything out. In fact, when I hit run, Launchpad's just going to ignore all of those comments. So I'm going to say loop through text notes and set text to upper. So I'm going to use what's called a for each loop. And this is, again, a fundamental building block of Visual Studio, of C#. And if you've worked in Dynamo, you're used to, using things like lists. If you use C# or you use Python, sort of text-based programming languages use loops a lot more. So I have this collection of text notes. Now I'm going to create a loop and I'm going to loop through them individually. So this is my for each loop. I'm going to create a variable of the text note type. I'm going to call it note, and that's going to be in my collector variable. So this is the syntax I'm using for my loop. Now in C#, I declare that for each line, and then I indicate the extents of that loop using a curly bracket on the left, an open curly bracket, and then a closed curly bracket. And this, you get used to dealing with curly brackets a lot. Python uses kind of spaces and indents. C# uses curly brackets quite a bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get the text. So I'm going to type a string variable. So I'm declaring my variable. I'm going to call it new text. And I'm going to set it equal to my note. That is my current text note. So the current text note is referred to as note. And then I'm going to get the text property. So I'm going to set my new text equal to the text in the note. And I'm going to use the toUpper method. So because it's a string in C# has access to certain kinds of methods. One of those is toUpper. So it's going to automatically change that string, whatever it is, into uppercase. So I go ahead, I change it to uppercase. Now I can set my note. So my current text note dot text, that text property that I got right here, I'm going to set that equal to new text. So I get the text, I set it to uppercase in a variable, then I set that text note text to that new uppercase text. So it's a little bit of moving things around, creating variables that are then I'm gonna store values and transform them however I need to. Now, before all this, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna create a number variable. So I'm gonna create an integer, so a whole number, and I'm gonna call it counter, and I'm gonna set it equal to 0. So now that I have a counter, each time I go through and I do this process of setting my text, I'm gonna increment that counter by 1. So I can do it two ways. I can set counter equal to counter plus 1. That would be one way. Or I can just say counter plus plus. So we're going to start at 0. We're going to get that first text note. We're going to add counter to 1 because we've updated one text note. And we're going to keep doing this sort of over and over again. Now, when I'm done, when I get through all of my text notes, I'm going to output something to the user. I'm going to say test dialog.show. And I'm going to say complete. That's going to be the name of that. And then I'm going to say, let's see, updated plus counter and plus text notes in the model. So this is going to create a dialog box in Revit to output that specific information. So I'm going to go ahead and click run. Let me slide this over. You can see I have some text notes right here already. So if I didn't screw up, we should see those automatically turn to uppercase. So let's cross our fingers. We give this a run. And you can see it's telling me updated 335 text notes in the model. I hit close and it did change some of them. Oh, some of these are keynotes. That's interesting. You can see the ones below are actual text notes, but not everything is a text note. Let me see. There's rain screen detail. I know this one. Let me zoom to fit. Yeah, so all of these got converted here. So I can undo that and I can give this a run here. and it's going to update all those text notes right there. Now, if I wanted to change these, let's say I didn't want them to be uppercase, I want to be lower, then I can use that to lower method in string. So I can choose, do I want it to go upper? Do I want it to go lower? I can give this a run, and then it's going to do the same thing. And now it's going to make everything lowercase right there. So I can save this script file out, and then I could, make changes. I could open it up. I can have a script for to upper. I could have a script for to lower. And then I can, load that script and run it whenever I need to. Now, there was a question earlier about, can I take this text into Visual Studio? Yeah, and so I could just grab this right here. I can take this code. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back into my Visual Studio that I already have running here. And I'm just going to paste my code in. And let's see, do a little bit of cleanup, but pretty much this is, for the most part, this would be ready to go. I could build this code right here. I do have my document variable as declared. Launchpad declares this document variable for me automatically in Visual Studio. I just need to make sure I have a variable called doc that relates to that current that current document inside of Revit. But that's really the kind of the essence. So I could go ahead, I won't do it because you saw how long it takes to build the code, but I could very easily turn this into an add-in that's accessible either through the external commands, or I could build it out and have it accessible in the ribbon. So it's one-to-one. The code that I'm writing, for the most part, inside of Launchpad, I can show and I can copy and paste it into Visual Studio. In fact, if I'm doing some testing and I just want to do a quick sketch, oftentimes I will do that in Launchpad just because it's faster and I have Revit open. So a question came up about user interfaces and things. So I did, let me go back into Revit here. This is a new toolbar that I'm going to be coming out with soon, probably in a couple of weeks. It's called Launchpad Explorer. This is going to be available as a free download. Essentially what I did is I took all of the tools that I had available in my Smart Pack add-in and I rewrote them in Launchpad. And so this is 100% Launchpad. So if I go into batch rename, I click on that. So this does have a full user interface right here. So if I want to rename, my rooms, my sheet names, I can do it using this tool. This is done, again, all of this code is in Launchpad. In fact, I can open up, let me see if I can get to that. I'm gonna have to dig for it. But I have a folder here that has all of those scripts. So they were written in Launchpad, tested in Launchpad, and then they're sort of deployed and available as part of the Launchpad Explorer. And it can even get a little bit, some of them get a bit complicated, like this Make Sheets has a data grid. So it can do some, pretty interesting things with regard to user interface. Again, this is all using Launchpad. So hopefully that answers your question. Emna has a question about, can we have the recording? Yes. So I am going to send out a link with the recording shortly after we wrap up here. So you can look for that in your email. And then Mark has a question. Can Launchpad access links in the current model to gather data? Yeah, absolutely. You can totally go through links. Yep. There's no restriction. So anything that's linked in, you can get access to that links document. And once you have that document variable, you have access to everything in that linked model. Okay, Tim asks, I'm assuming if you globally adjust your text, you can also write the code to adjust the alignment and spacing of your text notes as well. Yeah, absolutely. You could change those. I mean, provided you're doing it globally, and I could do it in my filtered element collector. I could specify it for a particular view. I don't have to do the entire model. So yeah, I could do that, go through. Once I have that text object, I could change any of those text properties, kind of like I would do here through the user interface, but I can do it through the API and then do it at scale for sure. Let me see in the chat. Okay, great. All right, so that was a quick demonstration of just some of the fundamentals of coding inside using Launchpad, just using C# and the Revit API. So we're almost through we've got two more of our items on the developer success path. So let's get on to those. I know we're about 60 minutes in. So we're got about another 30 minutes. So I appreciate you sticking around and staying here. So let's talk about components. So we've done our foundation, we've got our framing up. Let's start adding some of those components. So we're adding our skin, we're adding our windows and doors. And for this, this is what is called the see-do feedback approach. And this is something that I feel is really essential in terms of the Revit developer success path, because it gives you a framework for learning. And this is not something I came up with. It's from a book called Get Better at Anything by Scott Young. I highly recommend this. I'll send out the link to this because it gives you some really good skills and tools to just get better at learning things. Now, my big takeaway from the book was this see-do feedback. And what it means is when we're learning anything, we want to be able to see examples. We want to model and learn from others. Now, when we do that, we do our best learning looking at what other people are doing and then modeling their behavior, particularly when we are starting out. So it's important to find good examples to model. And when we don't have those examples, things take a lot longer. So we struggle to make progress. It's kind of thinking about like if I had to learn to program back before the internet, I'd have a stack of books and I'd have to flip through the books and maybe I'd be able to figure it out, but it would take me a lot longer. So having access to people to learn from is really important. Now, the other part of that is the do. So we can see what others are doing, but we really need to learn from practice. So this is hands-on, making mistakes. That's the important thing. And any kind of learning, we need to practice. We need to practice what we're doing so we can make those mistakes and then learn from them. And so I love this quote, action creates obstacles that lead to growth. And it's really the obstacles are the part that lead to growth. And that is also, a really good way to approach it. If you don't get it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an opportunity to learn. And this is important too. So watching videos and, doing like watching tutorials and things isn't enough. So you can't just consume information. You actually need to put it into practice. So you need some way, you need an example, you need homework, you need a challenge in order to really build that learning muscle. And this is a quote I really love. The more you do, the more you fail. The more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better you get. And that's from John Maxwell. And I think that's absolutely true. And that fits right here within that do part of the see-do feedback. Because you just need to get, it's like with sports, you need to get your reps in, and that's how you're going to get better. So it's important to build that into your learning plan. And then lastly, we have feedback. So this is learning from experience. Feedback is good, and then more feedback is better. So you want to get as much feedback as you can, and then you can correct actions as they happen. And this is kind of like having a coach, like you get stuck. That coach can help you get over whatever that hurdle is. So it's not enough to just take a class. You need examples to look at, you need practice, and you need to talk to other people, a coach or other students. And that's going to help you get through that learning curve. All right, step 4. And this is when we're getting to the finishes here of our project. And this is the one that's I'm really interested in right now. And this is where we can integrate AI into our process. And so I call this the digital master builder framework. And I had done a podcast on this a few weeks back. And it's an idea that's really taken over my own kind of programming work. So I want to share that with you. So the digital master builder framework gets at what I call the truth about AI in coding skills. And that's that you need more knowledge to really leverage AI. And if you've read, anything's coming out like on your news feed, there's been a lot of talk about AI is really going to sort of hurt the entry level programmers. And it's the more senior programs who have experience who are going to be able to leverage AI. And so I think it's important to know how you can work with it and what skills you need to have in place before you can really benefit from it. And so I want to talk about the three pillars of AI collaboration. And these are things that I think are really important as you're going to apply AI either to your own projects or to your own learning. And so this comes down to vision, direction, and evaluation. So with vision, you really need to know the problem you're trying to solve. So AI is not going to, or LLMs, whatever, ChatGPT, they're not going to be able to necessarily give you the problem. And I think this is where we're at a real benefit as Revit users, as architects, engineers, modelers. We know our domain and we know the problems we're having with this software. So we need to develop a skill set so we can articulate that problem. And again, within the domain of our expertise that we've built over, years and years of our careers and using the software. But this comes down to being able to articulate success criteria in your prompt. So your prompt is really your point of interface with that AI tool. And you want to clearly articulate the problem it is, and then also be able to get at what successful outcomes would look at. And so, there is a bit of an art, and it takes some trial and error. I've been using AI a lot in my programming, and I'm not a particularly good prompt writer, but that is important. But it's also important to kind of be persistent and really know what you're looking for. So having that vision is going to make things a lot better and a lot clearer. So the important part of this is, what are we trying to achieve? And that's the question you want to have an answer for instead of how do we code this? So what do you want to achieve? That can lead you a lot further than just getting right into the code. So we have that vision set up. Now we need to give our tool some direction. And let me go back one second. So this is where it helps to have a technical vocabulary. So you need to be able to talk to your tool, your AI tool, in such a way that you can get to specific outcomes, but on a technical level as well. So this requires being able to provide some structure and constraints, basically some guide rails for the AI. If you've ever seen, I'm sure you have, if you've used ChatGPT, it can hallucinate and make stuff up. So we do want to provide structure to prevent that, or at least not prevent it, but limit where that can happen. And it helps too to know how these generated components are going to fit into a larger system. So it really, it benefits to have that sort of technical know-how and to have written some code so you can see how the pieces connect together and you can put them together into a coherent piece. So that is really important. Now, I learned this firsthand when I built Launchpad. That was very much AI first. I did a lot of work in AI. Specifically, I know Tim has a question about all the different large language models out there, Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT. Do you have a recommendation on which is better to use alongside the Revit API? I have a personal favorite. I'm going to show you that. I use Claude. I use Claude a lot, and I used Claude a lot while I was building Launchpad. In particular, I like Claude's ability to create custom projects, and I'll show you some of those that I've created. They're similar to custom GPTs. I've just found them a lot easier to work with, and I've gotten really good results with C# and Revit API code out of Claude. And I know other people swear by ChatGPT or Gemini, but for me, Claude has been just a great tool to work with. So that's my recommendation. And again, I had to know when I was building it, I had to know what I wanted. I had a vision, and then I had to know how the pieces would fit, and then what, the different parts of the interface were and how they needed to work together. I didn't have to write all of the code. There's a lot of code. I didn't have to write every single line, but I had to know how I wanted the pieces to interact. And that's really, really important. Okay, so our third pillar here is evaluation. So you're going to get a bunch of code back, but you need to be able to evaluate that and determine whether it's going to be a problem down the road. And I do see this with sort of beginner programmers who maybe bite off a little bit more than they can chew before they have the technical skills yet. And they'll end up with just a ton of code coming from them. And so a lot of times that code can come back over-engineered or like super complex that, you get 300 lines of code when in reality it could have been a lot simpler. It could have been 100 lines or 50 lines. So being able to identify that, like, whoa, this is too much, is important to prevent problems down the road. So that's, being able to see those warning signs. And then I use this a lot, feedback loops. So I'll get code, I'll put a prompt in, I'll get the code back, I'll look at it and I'll say like, absolutely not. This is way, way, way too complicated. And I'll simply ask, can you make this simpler? And usually Claude is very polite. Yeah, sure, I can make this simpler. Oh, great suggestion. And then I'll iterate through that a number of times, just looking at the output and say, okay, that's something that I can understand. I should be able to sort of work with that and fix it. And then I'll integrate it into my code base in Visual Studio or Launchpad and then test it out and then sort of go back and forth. But I think that question, can you make this simpler? Or can you explain this? I don't understand this part of it. Can you explain it? Asking it and sort of using it as a collaborative partner, that's super, super important. And that will take you really far. Again, just don't take everything it says at first glance. And that comes down to being able to evaluate what it is getting. And is it anything close to what you want? Let's see, Mark asks, does Claude respond to presenting a step-by-step explanation? Yeah, so sometimes I'll put something in there and it will generate a ton of code. And I'm like, can you step me through each of these changes? And it will chunk out exactly, like particularly if I gave it some input code and I asked it to either help me troubleshoot or add a new feature, and it will chunk out each of the changes. So I can scroll through and be like, okay, now I understand exactly what's happening. So yeah, that's worked out really, really well. Now, those are the three pillars. And again, thinking of your AI tool, whatever it is, as a collaborator and treating it that way can yield a lot better results. Now, I want to show you an example. This kind of a fun example real quick. And this is something I actually did this last night. I don't know if you've seen this on LinkedIn. I saw this yesterday, and it's this is Studio Tim Fu, and they created this generative tower tool, and they did it using, looks like ChatGPT. And then this is kind of a web app that they created, and it has these sliders and things like that. So you can generate these different shapes. And I thought, oh, this would be interesting. As an example, can we do this inside of Revit? What would that look like? So let me switch over into Revit, and I'm going to open up, this is Launchpad command. So again, this is kind of the more advanced version. And Launchpad command, I'm sort of working through this, but it has an integration where it just switched. Here we go, with a specific project inside of Claude. So this is the Launchpad script creator. So I wrote up a prompt specifically for a tower generator. And let me just grab this. I'm going to paste it in here. So this project in Claude has been trained on a whole bunch of different Launchpad projects. So it understands how Launchpad works. It has some scripts that it can use as examples. So it has knowledge incorporated into it. So I'm going to put my prompt in here, and it says, I want you to create a script that generates a high-rise tower based on inputs from a user interface. And then I get very specific in here. Again, I have sort of some knowledge, so I know I want in the UI to have an input for the number of floors, floor to floor height, a length and width of the rectangle or the ellipse, and then a twist angle. And then I can choose, do I want it a rectangular floor or something to be elliptical? And then I also want to have some options for tapering the tower. So I went through and wrote this prompt, and now I'm just going to go ahead and click send. So it's going to start generating the code based on my specific Launchpad knowledge that I've put in there. And I put in code and standards and things like that. So this is going to take a little bit of while. You can see it's going to generate a lot of code. So while that's going on, I'm just going to open up a sort of previous version that I created. This is my tower script generator. And you can see in Launchpad, once in command, I have this code navigator, so I can go through my variables. There's a lot of code here. You can see it's giving me 73 different variables, and I can navigate to each of them. So it's saying this, Distance variable is on line 223, so I can take a look at that. And I can navigate just through the different components. Where do I have loops? Here I have a bunch of loops. So here are my conditionals. So I can sort of look through the code just like that. Now I'm going to switch into a different file, and I'm not going to save that project. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a run. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate, here's my high-rise tower generator UI. So I can choose my floor shape. I'm going to use an hourglass profile, and then I can set the taper intensity. And that's basically just describing how much it's going to taper. We're going to do 70 floors. We'll keep our floor to floor height at 10. And then I'm going to make a rectangle that's 45 by, let's say, 80. And then let's do a 4-degree twist per floor. Okay. We're going to generate curtain wall in here as well. So I'm going to choose exterior glazing as my curtain wall. And then I'm going to click OK. So it's going to create this tower based on those parameters. And we'll see it sort of generate as we go. Let's see. Now, Barry has a question. Does Launchpad utilize WPF or WinForms? So it's using WPF. So that's what's underlying all of the form creation. Okay, so now we created let me hit done on that. And okay, so we created 70 levels. And then now it's going to go through and actually generate the geometry for that. Answer. Caitlin is asking, is Launchpad command separate purchase? So it is right now it's not available. I'm still doing development. It's going to be available inside the Revit add-in bootcamp. And I'm going to use bootcamp students to help me beta test it and develop what the features are going to be. Now, Command is going to integrate, you can see with Launchpad Explorer where I was able to build out the ribbon. So that is all happening using an external, like a text file. So I'm going to add into Launchpad the ability to create your own custom ribbons and add icons and things like that as well. So that's going to be part of it. It's still in sort of early stages, but inside the bootcamp, you'll have access to it as I start to launch it. Okay. So this is going through. You can see it's not quite as slick as that web app in that, I'm not able to change and flex. This is Revit after all, but I'd like to see them generate construction documents from that web app. So that might take them a lot longer than it does for us to generate the actual model. So it's chugging through. It should be ready in a second. In the meantime, if we go back to Claude actually finished creating this specific code here. You can see here are different tapers. Oh, okay. Here we are back in Revit. And now it actually finished creating my twisting tower. So I can see here I have an elliptical shape. I have that bulge and I have that twist right here. So it created all of that. And I can see the output for each floor. It's giving me what those floor dimensions are as it moves through. And if I wanted to, I could undo this here. I could give it another run and I could change those configurations. And so essentially what I have is this generator tool. And it didn't take that long. All I needed was a really good prompt, and I needed tools that I could use to incorporate and build that very quickly. I think I spent maybe 20 minutes or so last night after I saw that LinkedIn post to generate that code, and it came down to 3 things: having a good prompt, being able to do some back and forth and evaluate the code that I got back, and then having a tool that I could then put that code into to iterate through this very, very quickly. So all of those kind of come together to be able to essentially like rapid prototype a tool. Let's see. Edward's asking, can this be run in a mass environment? Can you integrate sliders? So I haven't added sliders into Launchpad. That's something I'm thinking about. I think that could be kind of fun. It still won't have that dynamic ability like you have inside of Dynamo, at least not in this version of Launchpad. That may be possible in the future. But yeah, I think I could definitely I'm going to look at sliders because sliders are just cool. So, all right, how are we doing now? Right, we're kind of on the home stretch here. So let me switch back. We may run a little bit over 90 minutes, so I apologize for that, but it's just fun talking about all this stuff and showing you guys all this stuff. So please, if you've got to run, don't worry about that. And again, you'll get that recording when it comes out. Okay. Real quick, just as far as tools go, I mentioned that I showed you using the custom. I use Claude, and I have a whole bunch of different Claude projects. So if I go in here, these are all my projects. One thing I really like about Claude is that, let's say I have a project here called Launchpad Code, and you can actually sync a GitHub repository. So I do all my source control, all my code resides on GitHub. So I have linked my Launchpad code here to this particular project. So when I'm working on Launchpad, I'm doing that simultaneously with Claude open. And if I want to implement a new feature, I'm going to come here first. Claude has all of the code, so it knows exactly sort of where I am and what I'm working on. And that's super helpful. So I think, projects, custom GPTs are really essential, particularly if you have all of your code integrated into it. So then you can ask questions and have it build off of that. Another thing that I'm exploring inside of the Revit Admin Academy and the Revit Admin Bootcamp are custom agents. So that's something that's new in the platform, and I'm looking at them as learning aids. So taking all of the course content, putting that into a custom agent so that students can then use that as a resource as well and ask questions specifically of that. So that gets me into more on the learning side and using it as a learning tool. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening right there. So I do have a Revit Admin Academy bot. Let me click on that. So I'm just testing this out here, but it's actually using all of the course content in the Revit Admin Academy and the Revit Admin Bootcamp, and it will be available for students to ask questions of. So I'm excited about that part. Okay, sorry about that. Let's get into here we go. So those are our steps of the digital master builder. So the complete path, when you look at it, this is what I call the Revit developer. This is the success path. So you want to use purpose-built tools, learn solid fundamentals of C# and the Revit API, followed a structured learning path, especially one that uses the see-do feedback framework, and then become a digital master builder using AI and essentially following that sequence. And that, again, that is the Revit developer success path, at least as far as I see it. So now at this point, we're getting to the end here. You have two paths forward. So if you want to learn how to create custom powerful tools inside of Revit, you can do what I call the DIY maze. This is what I did when I started. And this was essentially piecing together information wherever you could find it. And what you may end up doing is spending a whole bunch of time figuring out what to learn and in what order. And then, you're going to struggle with errors and bugs without support. You can use kind of message boards, but that can be kind of iffy or inconsistent. And, the risk is you might give up when you have some obstacles, when you face some challenges. Now, path B is the guided success path. Now, what this is structured training designed specifically for Revit professionals and using tools that were custom developed for this process for AEC professionals who are developing Revit add-ins. And that includes things like Launchpad, that includes custom Visual Studio templates. All of that stuff helps make that process a lot easier. And then you're learning in an organized way with guidance at every step. And I think this is important as well, having a community of other professionals like you to give you support, give you answers, and give you some inspiration as well. So that's path B. So if you want to do path B, I have two options for you, two solutions to guide your journey. The first one, which is the complete journey, that's the Revit Admin Bootcamp. And I'll get into the details of this in a second, but it's a 12-week program designed for, serious learning, serious career advancement. And you're going to get step-by-step guidance through the fundamentals to creating working Revit add-ins. This includes weekly coaching calls. So you meet with me on a regular basis if you have questions. Then there's a whole community of people, like you who are on this same journey. So this is, as I mentioned, this is the full success path to becoming a Revit developer. You also will get, as I mentioned earlier, that you get exclusive access to Launchpad Command. So I'm working on developing that right now. And the price of the Revit Add-in Bootcamp, so that's $1,500 USD, and I do offer PPP discounts, so purchasing parity power. Caitlin has a question. I assume that customized Claude would not be available to those who have purchased Launchpad. At this moment, no. Simply, I'm still trying to work out the logistics of that. I think it will be available through Launchpad Command. And it's certainly possible to create your own Claude, like you can get your own Claude subscription and create a Claude project. So yeah, for right now with with straight up Launchpad, it doesn't have that capabilities. Command will likely have it. And again, I'm working through exactly how that's going to work on the command side. So hopefully that answers your question. So that's the complete journey. Now, if you're not quite ready for the complete journey, then you can take that journey for that first milestone, and that would be using Launchpad. As I mentioned, it's an add-in. It's self-paced, and it's an introduction to C# in the Revit API. So you don't need Visual Studio. You can do this all within Revit. All of the training is there inside of Launchpad as well. So if you want to explore automation using C# in the Revit API, before committing to something like the full bootcamp, then Launchpad is a great option for you. It's a kind of a lower price point, and if you do purchase Launchpad, you can actually apply that as a credit towards bootcamp if you want to upgrade. So that you have that option there for you, and you can actually start that right away. And I'll give you a link for that at the end. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to wrap up real quick. I know we're right at that 90-minute mark, so I just want to finish up with a little bit more information specifically about Bootcamp. And before I get to that, though, I just want to share just some testimonials. I've had, as I mentioned, I've had 9 cohorts. So a lot of people have gone through the Revit Add-in Bootcamp, and I'll send out a link with this as well. But these are just testimonials of students, recent students who have gone through. So we've gotten, we've built a really good community there through Bootcamp and the Revit Add-in Academy. And I've gotten some really good reviews, which I totally appreciate from all of these students here. So it's been good. We have a good process for teaching that. Okay, now details for the bootcamp, and I'll go through these quick. Essentially, what the bootcamp is it's a kind of guided experience. It's an online course, and for people who want to create their own Revit add-ins, that's the essential. It uses hands-on projects, so it's part of that See-Do feedback framework. So for every module, there's 5 modules. There is kind of skills portions, and then there is a challenge for you to complete. And that's where you get to put your skills into practice. So each module, you're going to be creating a new Revit add-in, and you can actually use those skills and use those add-ins right away. And it is progressive. So you build, each lesson builds on the others. We don't throw you in the deep end right away. We kind of step our way into it. And then at the end of the course, you have your own Revit toolbar that you created. So it's kind of fun to be able to see that. And then you can add new tools as you learn more and grow. And it's been really fun. I've had bootcamp students who then progress to the follow-up, which is the Revit Add-in Academy. And I have some of them who've been in the academy for a year or so or longer. And it's really fun seeing the stuff that they've created. And some are architects. So I have structural engineer, we have electrical engineer. So there's a really good mix of people in there doing really interesting stuff. So it's fun for me. Now, the benefits of the bootcamp, you get continuous learning. So you're going to be learning, you get skill sessions, there are bonus lessons. Every skill session has a challenge as part of it. There's continuous support, and that comes through these weekly coaching sessions. So if you get stuck, you can either attend and we can work through your problem live, or you can message me. There's also a community as well where you can ask questions. Let's see. There's a couple questions. Speaking of questions, let me answer these quick. Is Launchpad licensing for individual Revit version or yearly but across all versions. Mark, right now it is perpetual. So you buy Launchpad, you get it, forever, and it covers all Revit versions. So you can buy it once, and then you'll get all of the subsequent upgrades at no additional cost. Caitlin's asking, does Bootcamp go over how to get those add-ins to other users? Yeah, so module 5 of the Bootcamp will talk about deployment and how you can actually build installers and get your add-ins out to people. And Scott's asking, is the Bootcamp a set course timeline? Is it self-paced? So it does, I do run it as live cohort. So the next Bootcamp is actually going to start on March 31st. I've had people do it, come in sort of before that and do like a early study, and I've had people come in late. There's kind of the coaching part. It's good to be able to take advantage of that, but I also do offer weekly office hours through the Revit Admin Academy anyway. So generally, I find that people get the most success when they do it as part of the live cohort. And again, that's going to start on March 31st. So other benefits are the various tools. So you get Launchpad Command, you get Launchpad as well. We're looking at the new chat bots, so those are going to be really fun. You get templates. Those are super useful. Again, multiple Revit versions from one source of code. You also get the ArcSmarter code library. So this is a GitHub library that I've created over the years. It has 100 plus different methods. So it's really, it's a good library. If you're looking for specific code, you can use that library to get it. And you can integrate it and copy and paste it right into your own add-ins. So those are the benefits, specific details here. So the bootcamp is a 12-week course, and then you get access to the Revit Admin Academy for 24 weeks. So essentially, bootcamp is 3 months, and then you get access for 6 months. And so we do that, as a live every module, a module every 2 weeks, and that includes coaching throughout that. The specific modules, we start at the basics with C# and the Revit API. Then we look at creating Revit elements using the API. We deal with inserting and editing families. That's a fun one. Then we start getting into building your toolbar, creating user interfaces in module 4. And then module 5 is all about deploying your add-ins. So we'll talk about installers and things like that, and some of the challenges that go with it. So that's the breakdown. Now, there's a whole bunch of bonus lessons that go along with it. So I pair a bonus lesson with all of our regular skill sessions. So we look at Visual Studio, how to use GitHub. I have a lesson specifically on converting Dynamo scripts to add-ins. So there's no easy button on that, but and then deploying as well. And I have a whole library of how-to videos, how-to tutorials inside the Revit Admin Academy that cover a range of different topics, and they're very specialized and focused, and it's all come out of students like, oh, Michael, how do you do this? Okay, let me create a video for that. So we have a big library of those specific tutorials, and then you get the live weekly coaching calls. So we do a coaching call specifically for bootcamp students, and we'll go through whatever module you're on at that point. What are you struggling with? Or even just to talk about, hey, is this possible? Can I do this with the Revit API? These are always recorded, and then they're posted to the course website. So you get access to all the recordings as well. And then we have our private mentor group and community. So in addition to me, there's 4 mentors and the Revit Admin Academy. So you can post in our community site things you're struggling with. You can share your ideas, ask questions. We have a whole section where you can look at other tools that people have built and get inspired. So that's part of the whole experience as well. And then the custom tools and resources, which I mentioned. So I'll click through those quick so we can get you back to what you're doing. All right. So I'm going to show you real quick what it looks like on the inside. So this is the Revit Admin Academy. Inside of here, we have the bootcamp. My view is a little bit different because I'm the administrator, but I can take a look at the course and I can see all of my modules here. If I go into module 1, skills, I can see I have my skills video. Here I'm going to be looking at string variables, conditional logic, loops. And then I have a challenge. So the challenge is where you're going to actually put these skills to use. So module 1, we're going to do the FizzBuzz challenge. This is a fun one. You're going to submit your challenge results right here. And then we do a review. So you can see, okay, did I get the challenge right? How can I actually make this different? How can I change my code? So it's the full kind of feedback loop. So, and at any point, you can go into our discussion section and let me know, hey, I'm having a problem, specifically with this, or you can ask questions to me about anything you're dealing with. Now, we also have additional, more advanced courses, like we have intermediate Revit API, the business of add-ins. We have a whole course on user interface. We have advanced workshops, so we do these every month on specific topics. Last month, we were looking at Airtable. I did one advanced session looking at how I built Launchpad, so that was fun. And then I mentioned we have a whole how-to library. You can see there's a lot of different tutorials here as well. So that's a quick tour of what the course site looks like. About what it will cost, I mentioned the cost. So it is $1,500. That is the cost. But with that, you get the bootcamp course, you get access to the Revit Add-in Academy, the bonus lessons, you get Launchpad control, the mentor group, instructor support, the custom add-in templates, these new AI agents, and then you get the code library. So the total value for that, if you add all that up, what that comes to is like around $8,000 USD. So you add it all up. Now, obviously, that's not the cost itself. Your cost comes to $1,500. And again, I do offer PPP discounts as well. You can just reach out to me to see if you qualify for that. And if you look at the return on the investment, making just a handful of tools, you can actually pay for the boot camp will pay for itself in time. I do offer a guarantee, so you have a 30-day back guarantee. If you don't like it or you feel like it's not working, you can get a full refund within 30 days. So no problems, no questions asked. All right, we're almost done here. And then I want to just highlight this, how to justify the expense. And this gets into that ROI. So I think the way to look at this is really an investment for yourself, but also for your employer. So if you're going to be creating tools that your company is going to be used, I think it's reasonable to ask them to pay for the bootcamp. And we can do some ROI, return on investment math, real quick. So let's say you create a toolbar that has 5 tools. Each of those tools saves 5 minutes per use. It's pretty reasonable. Each tool gets used 5 times per day. And then if we add this up, so 5 tools, 5 minutes each, 5 times per day. That means those tools are saving about 125 minutes per day. We add that up over the course of a week, that's 10 hours per week. And then over the course of a year, that's 500 hours per year. So if we look at this from a savings perspective, let's say you're charging your build out at $125 an hour, that ends up being $65,000 in fee savings per year. So if you look at the cost of the bootcamp at $1,500, that ends up being more than a 40-time return on investment. And that's just from creating 5 tools. So those numbers add up really quick, and it very much in your favor. And that's, again, 5 tools over the course of a year. So I think can make a very persuasive argument. All right, so we're going to close up here. I'm going to just share with you a couple things. If you have questions, of course, you can always email me at michael@arcsmarter.com. Not a problem that. And if you are interested in the bootcamp, I encourage you to apply now. There's a short application to fill out. We're going to start with our orientation session on March 31st. And you can go to Revit-add-in-bootcamp. That'll take you to this page right here. I'll put that in the chat. And you can go through, just click the apply now button. There's a lot of information in here as well. So you can take a look at that and then click to apply, and we'll see if it's a good fit. Now, if that looks like it's sort of too much, or you're not quite ready yet, you can definitely take a look at Launchpad, and I encourage you to do that. With Launchpad, let me go to the link here, and you can go to arcsmarter.com/launchpad. And I have a page here and a short video specifically about Launchpad. I will paste that in the link, and I'll be sending these links out as well. And so you can actually purchase Launchpad right now and test it out, in the next 5-10 minutes. It's a download, you install it into Revit, and it's self-guided, so you can go right through the lessons right there and try out your code inside of Visual Studio. Okay. That's all I have. That was a lot. If you're still here, I appreciate you sticking around the extra 15 minutes. And I will stick around even longer to answer any questions. I know Caitlin has a question. Will there be another boot camp later this year? Yes, I'll likely be doing one in September. That's the plan right now. I don't have the actual date on when it's going to start, but it'll probably be around September. And then Mark is asking, for bootcamp, you need your own license for Revit. Yeah, so you would have to have a Revit license, and access to Revit one way or the other. But that's really the only license that you're going to need. Visual Studio is a free download. With bootcamp, you'll also get access to Launchpad and Launchpad Command. So that comes as part of the enrollment. So hopefully that answers that question. And any other questions, I'm happy here to hang out. Jacob's asking in the chat, what's the minimum weekly time commitment? I'd say it's anywhere from probably like 3 to 5 hours per week. So, every week there's going to be some exercises. The skills video, typically that's going to be for each module. That'll likely take you, an hour to 2 hours to go through. You're going to want to do some practicing. We have our sort of Q&A sessions every week, and that's an hour if you want to participate in those live. So I would say, 3 to 5 hours would be good, and that should get you enough to really get through the material and understand it. So hopefully that answers your questions. Paul, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Jacob's asking, are these in the evening or during working hours? Typically I've run our Q&A sessions on Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have done some additional times as well. I had in the last cohort, I had a couple of students who were in India, so we did a 10 a.m. on Monday. So I'm open to, if there are specific time zones or times that do and don't work, I'm open to kind of varying them. I always offer to change the Monday at 3, but that for whatever reason seems to work out for people well. I also do a more general office hours for the whole Revit Admin Academy on Thursdays, and bootcamp students are welcome to come to those as well. And that's also at 3 Eastern time. So hopefully that helps, Jacob. Great. Thanks, Lester. All right. I'll stick around here if there's any more questions. Otherwise, please contact me, email me if you have any questions. I'd love to see you in the boot camp. And again, if the boot camp doesn't seems like too much for you right now, definitely check out Launchpad. I've had a lot of fun developing it, and it's come out of my observations of people, how they get started with coding. So check it out for sure. All right. Thanks, Orlando. I'll see you on Thursday. All right, everyone. Great to see you. And thanks again.